Hi everyone and welcome to this new session on YouTube. My name is François Grassard. I'm one of the co-founder at Left Angle and also the CTO of the company. And today we are going to talk about a huge topic named tracking. There's so many things you can say about tracking and discuss about tracking, about the technical part, about the workflow, about the method. So what kind of tracking you are going to use to solve this specific problem with this specific shot. There's so many things you can talk about these topics. So in this session, in this pre-recorded session, I record this session this morning and try to edit a few things just to make it more compact. This session will last about 1 hour and I'm going to try to explain a bunch of things, a bunch of concepts using different kind of shots. Shot with just solid object and shot with some high deformation and high deformable objects such as a human face. So I will show you a few things about, in the first part, a few info about how 2D tracking work and how 2D tracking work in autograph, more especially because we have to keep in mind some basics concept. So the concept of markers and the concept of tracking models. Markers is about placing point on the footage, on the shot. And obviously the tracking method will try to follow this point. And after this, once you have a bunch of marker, maybe 1 or 2 or maybe more, it depends on the method used to track your shot. You're going to create a tracking model. I'm going to talk about that more precisely during the session. I'm going to do some pretty basic track with 3-point and 4-point tracking by replacing the content of a smartphone. In this specific case, about the 4-point with an S. I forgot an S in my text. And after this, I will explain how to extract, create, and extract motion vectors and UV map to drive additional element in the shot, and more specifically with deformable objects such as a skin, such as a t-shirt, a piece of fabric, and something like that. And I will finish by some hack using this UV map to create a painterly effect just by using UV map in some external file. So as usual, if you have any question, feel free to ask in the chat. I'll be there to answer your questions the best as I can. And let's see you in about 1 hour. Thank you very much. Let's talk about the different tracking system we have in Autograph, and we're going to start by the simpler one with the point tracker. A quick overview of what is possible using the traditional tracking workflow. So let's start by creating a composition based on this footage. I'm going to rename it final, and you can create a tracking just by relying on the properties panel, or you can also access the tracking option from the timeline. So if you click on this plus button, you can choose between point tracker and also planar tracker. We're going to talk about the planar tracker just after this initial introduction. And by clicking to the point tracker, you can see that we switch to a specific mode with a lot of controller at the top of the viewer. But you can switch back to selection mode, and remember, if you need to get back to the tracking module, to the tracking tool, you can simply use the tool history here available here, or you can simply use this small joystick to have quick access to all specific widgets available in the current composition. So I'm going to track a few points starting for the first frame. As you can see, you have 2 different tools, the select tool and the point creation tool. And I want to just zoom in the image and add a first point on the top left corner of this red area. You can see a first thumbnails on the top left because you can define different kind of keyframe along your tracking process just to readjust a few things. I'm not going to talk about this today, but you can adjust the position of your tracker if your tracker is sliding progressively during the tracking process. So now I've I can unfold the parameters of the tracker, and as you can see, there's a first general parameters who is named the model. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. And here you have the list of all your marker. If you unfold the marker one, you have the position of this marker, the green point here, who is named the center. You also have an offset. The offset is really useful when you want to track a point, but retain the position of another point, so you can introduce an offset. For instance, you want to track this left corner, but you want to place your element, your additional element in the shot at this position. You can simply define an offset between the tracked point and the point who will be used to define the final position. The error value will be computed by Autograph to define exactly if we think that your tracking is good. So it's just the difference between the original patch of this reference frame and the current frame who is available inside this patch. So a difference is made. If the difference is high, the error will be high also. And if the difference is tiny, the error will be low. So it's not an editable parameters. As you can see, it's grayed out. And most important here, the tracking model. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. I just want to let this parameters to location right now. And here I have different buttons at the top of the viewer. The first one is to track backward. So the fourth one is to track forward. And here you have exactly the same thing, just to track one frame backward or one frame forward. Here is to create new keyframes, but as I said, I'm not going to talk about this today. So let's push this button to track the shot forward. And as you can see, now we have the trajectory of this point defined by this curve. All the points along this path are green because the error value is pretty low. If you have an high value computed by Autograph in these parameters, these points will progressively turn to red, to orange, then to red. So if you see a red point, you have to check your path. It does not mean that your path is bad, that your tracking is bad, but it means you probably should check the tracking and obviously check the error value in this parameter. Using exactly the same concept, you can track different points at the same time. For instance, here I want to place this second point. I just want to check if this point is available during the wall shot, and maybe place another point here. Okay, and here I can select only this first and second point, as you can see here, because this point is already tracked, and by default you have a track all option who is going to track this point again. So because this point is okay now, I just want to switch to track selection only and just launch the tracking again. So now I have 3 points, as you can see here, and all this point has been tracked using a tracking model named location. The goal of the location is just to retrieve the position of this point. We don't care about the deformation of this patch, about the rotation, about the scale, just the location, just the evolution of the position of this point in the image during the shot. If you want to place something above this book, for instance, such as this frame, we are going to use this frame and place it on the book on the top of the stack here. Those points are pretty simple to track because the content of this patch is not really evolved across time. Obviously, the patch is getting smaller and smaller because the camera moved back in the shot. But as you can see, the difference is not so high between the first and the last frame of the shot. If I want to add a new marker on this part here, I can, as you can see, adjust the size of my tracker and also adjust the size of the searching zone, because in the shot, this part is moving slowly at the beginning and suddenly it moves pretty fast. So regarding the velocity of this patch, you have to adjust the offset. But I'm just I'm going to get back using the marker 4 here. I'm going to switch the type, the tracking model of this marker to something different, such as affine or perspective. If I stick to location, only the position of this patch will be tracked. If I switch to position and rotation, I'm going to track this patch backward. I think it's not going to track everything until the last frame, but we don't care. I have to adjust a few things to create a few keyframes to adjust the patch, because suddenly everything is moving pretty fast. I can also increase some parameters, such as the maximum iteration. As you can see, we have different kind of options, such as the maximum error. If you are above this error, when the patch is compared to the reference frame, to the first frame which has been tracked, the tracking will stop. And as you can see, we have a bunch of red points who are appearing along the path. You can also normalize the intensity. So if you have lightness difference between the shots, if someone is passing by the main character in project shadow or something, you can check this option just to normalize everything and keep the track consistent during the shot. And you can also increase the number of iterations like this one. So if I do exactly the same track just by increasing the number of iteration and normalize the intensity, I just, no, the tracking is stopping exactly at the same position. But maybe if I increase the size of the search area and I maybe increase the maximum error value, yes, now the shot is moving forward. The tracking is moving forward, as you can see. So once again, suddenly the movement is too high, the position changing is too high, and the tracking is finished, because I have to readjust a few things, to readjust a few keyframes. So as you can see, I just move my my tracking point during my animation, and I generate a second keyframe to have a better tracking. So as you can see here, I only have the position which tracked based on the center of this patch. But now if I switch back to location and rotation and track this tracking again, you can see that the tracking now is working, because I track not only the location but the rotation. So in the mind of Autograph, this patch is rotating right now, and when you try to find this patch in the next frame or in the previous frame, if you track backward, you're going to rotate this patch during the searching process to find the patch more easily. And you can do exactly the same thing if you select the location and scale, or location and rotation and scale, and launch the track again. So now, as you can see, the size of the patch is changing too. It's not only about the location and rotation. You can see you have some changing regarding the size of this patch. But I can also switch to affine if you want to define an affine transformation. So in this case, as you can see, the affine model is working better than the other one. So keep in mind this concept of tracking model, because it's going to be pretty different than the model available here. The model is going to be used to transfer the transformation, the position and location and rotation and scale information from these tracking points with an S to your frame you want to put on the book. So this fourth point was just to show you the different model available to track this point, but I want to remove it. So I just want to select the marker 4 and just remove this marker. So now let's get back to this 3 point previously tracked using only the location model. It was enough for this kind of tracking. This 3 point is now defining a model. We can define a model such as the reconstruction of the movement will be applied to a second element, such as my frame. And once again, I have to define exactly what kind of transformation I want to recreate. Maybe I only want to use the location to retrieve the location of this 3 point, or maybe the location and the rotation, location and scale, or maybe both at the same time. Or maybe an affine transformation who need a minimum or 3 points to be defined, or maybe a perspective transformation, but I'm not going to talk about the perspective model right now because I have a dedicated demo for this just after this one. So I'm starting with just the location, okay? I have access to this model here in the timeline. I select this model and I just copy it by pressing Ctrl+C to copy this model and keep it in mind. So now I'm just drag this frame in the picture, and I'm just going to place it on the book. But one thing is important here. In the model, you can see that you have a parameters named reference frame. The reference frame is here to define exactly which frame you're going to place this kind of secondary element, such as this frame, or if you want to add a patch on the piano in the background. So for this one, I'm going to use the last frame as a reference frame. So I just go to the last frame and click on set current frame. So now you can see that the frame 47 is set as a reference frame. I roughly place my frame on this book, and now I need to add a transform modifier to this layer who is named a follow track. Okay, don't mess up with the follow path, it's the follow track. And if I enter the follow track, now I have parameters who can link a model. So now I just have to paste this link. And if I just move along the shot like this one, I can see something is happening. My frame is moving. If I remove the background, I can see my frame is moving. Is moving not at the right place, but my frame is moving. So the reason why I have this movement is because I only rely on the position of these 3 points. But if I get back to this model and now switch to location, rotation, and scale, I can see that now everything is matching properly. So I want to track the location and rotation and scale at the same time. And now, as you can see, everything is matching now. I just have to select my frame and maybe add a defocus on it, enter the defocus and just remove the highlight boost here, not this one, but this one, and maybe increase a little bit the defocus value, not so much, just to match the background, maybe 12, and get back to the modifier and add a grade modifier just to play with the black point value and the white point value like this one, and also play with the gamma. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the integration of this frame. I can also put this one with a semi-transparent value like this one, so it's much better. But the goal here is just to understand how you can track 3 points in the background and just use a model defined by this 3 points, a model who is set here to location, rotation, and scale. And if you set this model to affine, you can also have different kind of distortion based on the movement of this 3 points. But in this case, obviously my frame is a solid object, so I don't want to distort everything. And we are going to talk about how to distort some patches, some images, according to the deformation of the surface. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. The goal was just to understand the concept of the marker and what kind of tracking model you are going to use for this specific marker. And once these markers are set, how you can interpret all the movement of this marker to define a model based on the location, the rotation, the scale, or both at the same time. So that's it for the point tracker, and now let's talk a bit about the planar tracking. Using exactly the same concept, you can track this kind of shot when you need to define a rectangle using 4 points. The concept is going to be exactly the same because you're going to place track and define a model, but this time it's going to define a perspective model. So I'm just starting from this footage and want to use this external photo to simply get the content of the screen and put this content on this moving screen. I'm going to start by creating a new composition and name this one final. Just need more room for this viewer here. Just going to unfold everything and click on point tracker. I'm going to define a reference frame, maybe this one because it's not moving at all in this frame. Just want to place a first tracker, second one, and also third one, and the last one at the bottom left corner. I just check that track all is selected, and I'm starting to track backwards. So now, as you can see, everything is tracked. These 4 points are currently tracked, and I'm just press the U key to see exactly all the keyframes generated by this tracking. I get back to this reference frame, and now I finish the shot by tracking forward. I just move in the timeline and just select the model, and now I'm press Ctrl C to copy this model, and I'm going to drag these images here in the composition and get back into select mode. So now I want to just extract the content of the smartphone to move it and distort it to match the other fast smartphone, the moving smartphone. And for this, I'm going to add on the transform parameters a corner pin modifier. And just before moving this point, I just want to move to my reference frame. The first frame who has been tracked by the tracker is defined as the reference frame. If you take a look at the model, you can see that the reference frame is set to 3 seconds and 7th image. That's exactly the time in my viewer here. And you can set a different keyframe if you want, a different current time, but I'm going to stick on this initial frame, and you have to move the point, you have to distort this second image coming from the second smartphone at this reference frame. Is going to be so useful by doing this way. So I select my smartphone and get back to my corner pin, and here I have two different modes, the to point and the from point. The from point is to define exactly what area I want to distort. So I switch to 2 point, but if I move this point, as you can see, the image is already distorted. So I have to get back and turn off the corner pin modifier and just adjust this from point to define where to place the bottom left corner, upper left corner, upper right corner, and just finish by the bottom right corner. So now I get back to the 2 point editing, and for this I just need to turn off the visibility of my smartphone and just frame the other one. So I move my 2 point here. Once again, adjust the corner. I just want to go further than the green pixel because I'm going to remove the green to create transparent pixels. So I just want to push the image a little bit further outside the original area. And okay, if I turn on the visibility again, and also obviously turn on the corner pin, you can see now the whole image is distorted to match exactly the right position regarding the position of the smartphone in the video. Now I need to add another modifier just to attach this image to the previously made tracking. To do that, I'm going to add a follow track modifier to the transform, and remember I previously copied the model, so now I can paste the model. And if you take a look now, you can see that everything is moving nicely. But nothing is distorted according the perspective of the original smartphone in the video. And the reason why we have this effect is because the current model is set to location. So only the position changing is transferred to this second image. If I switch from location to location plus rotation and scale, you can see some additional movement right now. If I switch back to a thin, it's even better, but because I track 4 points, I can switch to perspective. And now everything is distorted regarding the content of the original video. So the last thing I need to do right now is just to put this smartphone in the background, get back to the selection mode, and just add a color difference key. I'm going to do it pretty quick right now, just by selecting the color and inspect the corrected matte. Just want to inspect only this one. Get back to the matte and adjust the value of the white point and the value of the black points. And now everything should be transparent right now. Get back to the final mode and now it's done. Okay. The only thing you need to do is just maybe add a slightly blur on the image, not too much as you can see, just maybe 2 or 3 pixels, and maybe finish by adding a grade just to pull the light down a bit, like so, and maybe just push the black value to do not have any full black value, but gray value. And it's done. So as you can see, the concept is exactly the same. You track 4 points and you can use a perspective model when you have 4 points. Remember, 1 point is for position, 2 points for position, rotation and rotation and scale. And 3 points can be used for a fine model. And when you have 4 points or more, you can also have more points because an average will be created. An average will be computed when you have more than 4 points. The perspective model is made to do this kind of shot, to try this kind of shot and do this kind of deformation. So that's it for the 4-point tracking. Using this technique, you can obviously replace the content of a smartphone, but you can also replace a billboard or maybe an advertisement on the side of a bus who is passing in the shot. You can do this kind of thing. To talk about the planar tracking concept, I'm going to rely on this shot and I'm going to track the end of this girl. So obviously I need to create a composition for this. I just want to reduce the duration of this composition just to track the beginning of the shot. So once again, I just need to click on the tracker button and click on planar tracker. In my previous demo, we track points, and the main difference between point tracking and planar tracking is, in the case of planar tracking, we're going to track areas of pixels. So that's the reason we automatically switch to the shape tool, which is also integrated in the planar tracking system. So here I'm just going to draw a shape around the hand of this girl, and as you can see, the first keyframe is defined here in the timeline. We didn't talk about this previously, but the first time you place a track, as you can see, a keyframe is created and also a first keyframe for the model. It's really important to keep this in mind because the concept of reference frame is going to be really important in the concept of planar tracking. So I can already set this frame as a reference frame, so where I'm going to place a logo on the hand of this girl, it will be done at this reference frame, and it will be far easier to do this at this reference frame. So I just want to adjust a bit the shape here, so I'm not going to track points, I just want to track a bunch of pixels. And once again, exactly the same concept. I can track backward or I can track forward based on this reference frame. So this planar trackers is nearly similar to what you can achieve with Mocha, for instance. As you can see, this tracking is continued because it's not stopped by the end of the composition. So if you want to stop it, you just have to adjust the visibility key and maybe remove some keyframes here, but we don't care. The most important is to have this moving shape now who has been tracked according the movement of all pixels inside this area. So in parallel, I'm going to import this left angle logo and just rename my main composition final and get back to the parameters of this planar tracking. So once again, I have access to the model in the timeline and press Ctrl C to copy this model. I drag this logo here in the stack and just want to add a corner pin, so it's not available as a source modifier, but it's available as a transform modifier. Once again, I have to remember the reference frame. So if I just get back to my tracker and check the reference frame, I can see that the reference frame is the number 10. So as I previously explained, I'm going to move the 2 point here. I don't need to adjust the from point because it has been defined according to the position of the logo. I don't want to adjust, spend too much time to adjust this patch here. I just want to add a follow track modifier on the transform and just link to the model I previously copied. And now, as you can see, everything is moving nicely according to the position of the hand of this girl. I just have to switch maybe to a soft light to simulate the tattoo and just reduce the opacity and add a blur. Oh, sorry. Add a blur on the source because I just want to simulate a small defocus or small diffusion of the tattoo on the hand. So now, as you can see, everything is moving with the hand. The logo is moving with the hand. Because the model is connected to your follow track modifier, you can now redo the track from scratch or adjust a few things here and there if you want, and everything will be updated live. You don't have to copy and paste again because the model is linked to the follow track modifier, is not a copy of the information computed by Autograph at a certain time. It's a continuous connection between the two. So here I'm not going to deform this patch. We have a different kind of warping tool, such as a spline warp tool. I'm going to show you this in a moment. But as you can see, I just track a bunch of pixels. I'm going to remove this thing. I just track a bunch of pixels in a shape and just use this patch to track the whole hand. So that's the way the planar tracker works. Now I'd like to talk about two concepts, named the motion vectors and also the UV map generation. Here I quickly add a left angle logo on the top of the jacket of this walking guy, and for this I use something we call a vector corner pin. The goal of the vector corner pin, I'm not going to explain too much things about this because I want to spend more time to the concept of how to generate motion vectors and UV map and how to use them to drive distortion on movable and deformable surface. But just to explain the concept a bit, you start from a new composition with this footage and add a simple logo here, and you can add a new vector corner pin modifier. Be careful, this modifier is available as a source modifier and not as a transform modifier, because the corner pin is available as a transform modifier and the vector corner pin is here available as a source modifier. You are going to distort the pixels here. So the goal here is to simply use this corner pin point to give an initial placement of this logo on the jacket. And here you're gonna track your shot, and several files will be generated on your drive. We're going to explain this in a minute. And the goal is to combine the tracking of these 4 points regarding obviously the details available on the jacket, and also to track the movement of the pixels inside this corner pin and distort the pixel according this movement. And you have different kind of parameters such as the motion influence, so you can mix between the movement generated by the pixel movement between the movement generated by the corner pin. And the most interesting thing here is you can add keyframes along the track. You can say, I want to move my logo here to this position, and then this position, and you're going to interpolate between these two keyframes using tracking of these 4 points and the movement of each pixel inside this area. So I'm not going to explain the whole process here because I'm going to explain everything using the UV map generators, but keep in mind that the concept is exactly the same when you use the vector corner pin. You place keyframe along the shot and you want to track all the pixel movement between these keyframes. Not only two, you can have different keyframes along the shot, like this one. As you can see, I placed 3 keyframes, and then you learn the track, exactly the same concept as we did previously for point tracking and planar tracking, and movement of pixel will be analyzed and used to distort the position of the logo, like so. As you can see, we have a micro movement of on the jacket. Just going to get back in a full resolution. You can see some micro movement here and micro deformation of the logo on the jacket. So to explain the concept, let's start from this shot where a guy is talking with a lot of tiny movement and deformation of on his cheek. I'm starting by creating a new composition from this footage, rename it final, and really important, I'm gonna save my project. That's really important because you're going to create intermediate file on your drive, and by default, all these files will be created just next to your project. You can define custom location, no problem with that. But by default, when you save your project, all the motion vectors and all the UV maps will be generated into a dedicated folder placed just next to your project. So instead of using the vector corner pin modifier, I'm going to use another modifier here named the UV map generator. So by default, the screen is completely black right now because we need to set a motion source. The goal of the UV map generator is to first not generate UV map, but generate motion vectors to analyze the movement of each pixel in the frame from one frame to another, from the current one to the next one and the current one from the previous one. So in this case, I want to analyze exactly the same footage. So I have to drag this original footage to motion source. The motion source here is exactly the same footage, but in some case, you want to rely on external footage with some adjustment according the lightness, the color, if you want to add a blur, if you want to do some edge detection on something like that. So it can be pretty handy to prepare your file before putting it into motion source. And obviously you can put a composition as a motion source if you want to do this adjustment in the same project. So just to have something on the screen, I just want to turn off my UV map generators. By default, as I said, we are going to create a external file, additional file on the disk And this file will be placed at this location. So this variable in Autograph is to define, to get the path to your current project, the project you save on the disk. We have different kind of variable like this one, who can be referred into path, into script, into project, into expression, into anything else. So this one is just to define where your current project is saved on the disk. So we had a slash and we had motion vectors. It's added by default. So a new folder just next to your saved project will be created named motion vectors. And it will not contain only motion vectors, but also UV map. We are going to talk about that right now. So the most important thing to set here is the reference frame. We already talked about the reference frame when we talked about point tracking and planar tracking. We have exactly the same concept here. The goal is to define a frame where you are going to add a view thing on the face of this guy. For instance, I want to use this frame, will be the 33, because he has a closed mouth and the skin on his cheek is not too stretched or too compressed. So I want to set this reference frame by clicking on the set to current frame button. We have a bunch of parameters to compute the movement, the vectors, the motion vectors of each pixel in Autograph. We have different kind of algorithm available, and I'm not going to explain everything because it can be quite technical and it takes a long time, but I just want to give you some reference to understand exactly how it works. The first thing to maybe change is to change the frame distance. By changing the frame distance, you are not going to analyze the movement from one frame to the next one or to the previous one, but you are going to skip some frame, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, it depends. It's going obviously to speed up the process when the motion vector are computed, but it can also smooth everything temporarily because you are going to analyze just a few steps and interpolate everything between these steps. So, because I want to show you the process in live condition, even if it's a pre-recorded session, I don't want to change any parameters. Just to be precise, you have the ability to track the whole layer range, or maybe a custom one to define just from one starting point to an ending point. And you can also track the whole image or only a limited track region. Be careful about that when you want to define this region, who will obviously speed up the process. You have to add an extra margin around the face of this guy, because if you are too close to the front head and to the back of the head, you're going to have some distortion on the edge of this area. So just add an extra margin, but in this case, I just want to track the whole image. All these intermediate files will be stored as an OpenXR file sequence, and you have the ability to choose the precision of this file. By default, it's half float, it's 16-bit float precision, but you can also switch to 32 bits if you want. Most of the time working with half is enough, but if you want to switch to 32 bits to have more precision and obviously more heavy files on your drive, it's up to you. You can also define a track identifier, because we're going to talk about how to generate multiple UV map sequences with different reference frame. So in this case, every all file will be dumped into the same folder, the motion vectors folder here. So maybe you want to add an identifier to just say this image sequence is using this reference frame and this one using this reference frame. But we're going to see that all this information is already indicated into the file name. Let's take a look at the project before launching the track. As you can see, I have an HEP file here, and now I'm clicking on Generate UV Map. As you can see, the process is ongoing and a new motion vectors file folder has been created, and some files are now visible in this folder. You have MV, like motion vectors, and you have also have UV track. I'm just waiting for the process to finish. The most important thing here to notify is we have dist1. It's distance between the frame. It's directly referred to the frame distance here. If you put 2 in this value, you will see dist2 in the file name of the motion vectors. Regarding the UV who has been generated, we're going to talk about the UV. You can also see this information, dist1, and also the number of the reference frame. So the UV are generating from this reference frame to the current frame. We're going to talk about that and how Autograph accumulate motion vector information to generate this UV map. So take a look at this UV image sequence, this motion vector image sequence, sorry. So there's a lot of flickering out there, as you can see, a lot of flicking pixel representing the movement of each pixel. It's called a motion vector with X and Y movement because we only store information in the red channel and the green channel, nothing in the blue channel. The red channel obviously represents the movement of the pixel horizontally, and the green channel contains the movement of each pixel vertically. There's more than mid-VI here because you can see, okay, this area has exactly the same value. But if we rely on the color picker, you can see that we have higher value than full red. We have a value here of 3 in the red channel. So that means this pixel has moved by 3 pixels to the right from the previous frame to the current frame. Exactly the same here. We can see we have not black value, but negative value, who can be obviously displayed on your screen. And we have a really high contrast in this image because if a pixel is moved by 1 pixel, the value stored in the red channel, for instance, if we talk about a horizontal movement, will be above 1, equal or above 1. So that's the reason we have this red area here and yellow area and also black area. But if we just play with the gain in the viewer here, we can see more clearly what happened here. We have more details in the motion vector who show that we have a movement to the right and to the top for this pixel and a movement to the left and to the bottom for this pixel. Because this guy is blinking, we can see the blinking more clearly here. So this motion vector can be useful to distort a few elements. That's the difference between in Autograph some modifier such as displace and distort. I'm just going to type this. Distort is based on motion vectors and displace is based on luminance of an external file or an external graphical source. So that's for the motion vector. And obviously it can also be used to generate motion blur in post using, for instance, Smart Motion Blur from Revision FX. But this motion vector most of the time cannot be used directly without this kind of modifiers or plugins. But more interesting for us is the generation of the UV map. The UV map are usually used to distort elements when you work with 3D rendering because you render a UV path and you drive the deformation of an additional image based on this UV. But in this case, the UV map are based on the reference frame. Remember, we define a reference frame at 43. So if you go to 43, you can see that you have a perfect gradient from left to right in the red channel and from bottom to top in the green channel. And progressively, if you move in time like this one, we can see some distortion because the pixel who was exactly at this position at frame 33 is now moving, and if you want to find exactly the same pixel at frame 0, this pixel will be placed here. So you have now a sequence who can drive distortion of any external element you will place on the face to distort this element. And as you can see, we can clearly see the movement of the mouth of this guy. So if I get back to my composition and I turn on the generator, you can see that now the footage is displacing itself based on this reference frame, the 43. Remember, our reference frame is the frame 43. So nothing is moving at the frame 43, and we have this kind of distortion where the pixels are moving twice. Each movement of the face is generating actually an additional movement of the pixel, and it creates this kind of distortion. So now I load exactly the same project, but I previously imported some external elements such as this logo or this car on this left angle logo, autograph logo, and some bruise here to add on the face. So once again, this UV generator displays the original footage by itself, but I can simply create a new composition and add, for instance, first, I'm going to start with the logo here, name it add, get back to the original composition, and just replace the source of this layer by the add. So now, as you can see, we have this kind of distortion applied to the logo, but you can also notice that the logo is stretched to cover the entire format of my final composition. So to fix this, I just have to unfold the source parameters and say I want to adjust to source format. I want to retain the original format who was here in 1920 by 1080. So I get back to my final composition and switch this and click on this switch. But be careful, because I still have some deformation on the reference frame with the frame 43, because my original footage is not in Full HD. It's 1920 pixels multiplied by 856. So I have to switch to custom mode and enter exactly the same value, 856. So now if I get back to my final composition and go to frame 43, I can see nothing is now different. I can now use the original footage in the background and just see the deformation who are applied by the motion vector. We can see this guy blinking on the logo here. So let's activate the auto fit, and now I want to simply lock this viewer and enter the add composition to play with this logo. I just want to play with the controller, who is now focused on this layer and not the layer used in the final composition. Can reduce it like this one and put this on the cheek. Maybe play with the skew a bit. Let's just check the movement of this logo. So as you can see, if I get back to the final composition, so as you can see, my logo is now perfectly distorted by the UV map. If I switch from normal mode to maybe overlay or soft light to blend the color of the logo with the color of the skin, I can have a better integration and maybe just play a bit with the transparency and also add a really small blur like so. So now, as you can see, I have this logo moving according to the deformation of the face. And now I'm free to add a number of additional elements without doing anything. I just have to enter the add composition and maybe take this image here and place it on around the eyes, and the second one also. So just scale it down a bit, move it around the other eyes. It's a pretty big picture. So here, maybe take this composition, who was initially set to use the whole logo, but here I'm just going to add to source format and use only this logo. So place it on the front head, just play with the skew parameters, and as you can see now everything is moving perfectly according to the deformation of the face. Just want to get back a bit here and increase the opacity of this layer, get back to add and maybe put the white bear logo on top of the stack, just not to be hidden by the bruise on the face. And because this guy had a really bad day, I'm gonna add another one like this one on the face, and maybe a last one, just to be a little bit rude with him. Place it just underneath the mouth like so. So now I just have to play the animation and get back to the final composition like this one. So now we have a pre-generated UV map who can be generated with a lot of parameters, who can be pushed really high to have a really high quality UV map pre-generated. But as you can see, once this UV map is pre-generated, you can add a bunch of things and have a almost real-time response from your computer. So here again, I only working on a small laptop. So obviously, if you have a big computer with a lot of cores in your processor and a big graphic card, everything will be obviously speed up by this. And the generation of the UV map also are in most cases hardware accelerated by your graphic cards. So if you have a huge GPU and you rely on one of the model named the TVL-T1, if I get back to the UV map generator, I see I can have different kind of motion estimation parameters, such as the dense inverse search, who is most of the time stable around the reference frame, but can introduce some distortion when you go away from this reference frame, backward or forward. And the dual TVL1 is a bit slower, but if you increase the time step and you also increase the number of iterations to make some adjustments, you can have a really good UV map, exactly the same as I use here, as you can see. And the fun part is I just have to go to the add composition and maybe add another scar on the front head here, and it's done. Okay, once the composition are made, once the UV map are generated, you just have to place whatever you want on the face of the guy and everything will be computed. I reloaded my final project just to show you you can also add additional warping to the initial logo or any additional element in this composition. Here for the white bear logo, I add a modifier named the spline warp. The goal of the spline warp is just to distort, to deform your logo using different methods. To quickly show you what you can do with this tool, I just starting from the beginning with this guy and just adding a spline warp modifier. You have different kind of pin you can add to the image. This one is just to keep this part. If I, for instance, place a pin here, I say I want to keep this part untouched during the process. If I use this one, I can say I want to start from this point to this point and everything will be distorted. Obviously, the and touch point will remain exactly the same. You can also use this kind of spline deformer. For instance, I want to set this initial position for the cheek and draw a second spline here. And as you can see, I can morph from this position to this one. I can also invert the position and push the movement further. I have a warping factor available for each individual element. I have also an access to every spline. This is regular spline created in Autograph, exactly the same thing as you can get with the shape tool. So you can animate them, you can have a full access to the points if you want to keyframe everything, expression and this kind of stuff. So, and you have a warping scale here, who is available for every single spline. One also is pretty interesting is the one named the flow spline, because I'm going just to, as you can see, add this this curve and just push my pixel along this curve. It's like a twirl effect, but with custom spline. That's pretty interesting. You have to don't push this thing too far, because you can have a bunch of additional deformation, but just, to rotate a thing just with a small rotation, a small distortion, a radial distortion like this one, it can be pretty handy. I'd like to finish my presentation by showing you this experiment I made this morning just before editing this video. The goal here is to use UV map to drive single images who has been previously stylized. Just to tell you a bit about the concept, I just want to resize this window here and just give more room to the properties panel. So I started from this image sequence here, and I just use our color difference key here to pull a matte from this green screen, just by using also a single shape, a pretty quick shape, to just keep this foreground part. So now I have an alpha channel, and I previously exported 3 frames, as you can see, frame number 0, number 48, and number 95. The frame 0 is obviously the first one of the animation. The frame 48 is in the middle of the animation, and the frame 95 is the last one of this sequence. So everything has been exported in PNG file, and I use an external program to just convert this image to this Penterly effect, and I also did exactly the same thing for the background. So I imported all these images in Autograph here, the first one here, the second one here, and the third one here, and I use this keying composition to generate 3 UV map sequence using the UV map generator. The first one is creating by defining a reference frame at 0. So the first frame is the reference frame. You can see everything is moving now when I travel in the future. And if I now take a look at the second UV map sequence, this one uses a reference frame defined at 48, so the frame in the middle. As you can see, everything is moving in one direction when I go into past, and in the other direction when I move in the future. And the last one, exactly the same concept, but for this one, I defined the last frame, the frame 95, as the reference frame. So now everything is moving this way when I go to the past. And I created a last composition here where I have 3 UV map modifier. So I have only this first keyframe, this first image defined by the first keyframe, who is driven by this first UV map. So you can see obviously at the first frame everything is fine, and we can see some weird things happen here. when I move in the future. I did exactly the same thing here for the second one. So the frame 48, who is now the frame 24, because I divided the frame rate by 2. Now I play the animation at 12 FPS. You can see this frame is fine because it's obviously the frame I previously extracted from my animation. But if I move to the past, you can see some deformation. I make this transition using a noise generator and just playing with the alpha channel of this noise generator to make this image appearing progressively over the previous one. So no, I'm not in the right composition. So here it is. I can simply check enable mask, and you can see that now the frame 48 is obviously good, but some weird thing happened before this frame and after this frame. Okay, and I did exactly the same concept for the last one. So once again, I'm going to uncheck the enable mask checkbox. You can see here that the last frame is good because it was the frame extracted from the initial sequence, and now everything is distorted when I go back in time. And I create this transition between these three sequences. I have just to check enable mask back. And now you can see that I have everything is distorted by UV maps, but using different keyframes. So, and I finish to use by using my keying just to remove the background pixel, the white background pixel in this case, using the destination in blending mode. And in the final composition, I just add the background and just add a small noise on the position just to have this small jittering in the background, because it was previously too static. So you can see that obviously we need more keyframes to create this kind of thing. We need to extract more images, maybe obviously depend of the movement of this guy, because it works pretty fine until we switch to this second sequence, because the mouth is open. So if the mouth is moving, obviously we need more keyframe, but it's only a body movement. It can work pretty well. If you take a look at the guy in the background, it's only 3 keyframes, but we have the whole movement of this guy. You can see it turning his head and getting that, move his shoulder, and same thing for this one, except from these arms. You can see something really weird happen in this area because he's moving his arms. But take a look at his head. You can see that he can turn his head and move his whole body. So it works pretty fine actually, but obviously we need to extract more keyframes to generate this effect. And for the stacking part, everything could be automated using the instancer. If you want to take a look at the last video added to the YouTube channel, you can see I can use the instancer to just spread 52 cards on the table just using one layer. And the instancer can also be used to temporarily stack different kind of sequence and make them appearing and disappearing. So this manual process of stacking different sequence on top of each other could be automated using the instancer. So I hope you find this stylized rendering interesting based on video. I think it will inspire you to make some cool experiment like this one. Feel free to try a bunch of things with motion vectors and UV map. For a lot of people, motion vectors are just to distort a few things or obviously generate motion blurs. But using this workflow, you can create so many interesting effects, for non-photorealistic rendering like this one. It's obviously not a rendering because it's not in 3D, but yeah, feel free to experiment and have fun. And we are back live. Thank you very much for being here during this session. I hope you learned a bunch of things about the possibility regarding the 2D tracking in autograph, point tracking, planar tracking, and also the generation of motion vectors and UV maps. All the features regarding UV map generation, the UV map generator, will be available in the next release of Autograph, who will be hopefully available next week, including also a bunch of new things for the creation of past generations, such as circles, squares, stars, and things like that, but also a camera project modifiers who allows to do camera mapping right inside Autograph to project the texture on 3D objects, and also a huge performance improvement regarding the 3D rendering. So I hope you find this session interesting. Thank you very much for being here with me today, and see you next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.